Well, hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to my misery. That's right, I have another one of those DIY projects that I have to deal with that I thought I'd bring you guys along. Basically what I have is I have a plumbing problem going on. I have a plumbing leak going on. This is a slab foundation that my house is on, and you're looking at the slab right there. And this floor was in perfect condition just a couple hours ago, but unfortunately one of the pipes decided to break under this floor, and it is pushing up the floor and flooded this entire area right here. So finally I was able to deduce what is going on here, because at first all you do is have water everywhere. You don't know where it's coming from. So I'll explain later how I figured all this out. But what I figured out is that a pipe under this floor is broken and it is leaking and the water is coming up through here, and it literally turned this whole thing into a swamp. So I thought I'd bring you guys along. I turned on the camera. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on. I'm going to show you exactly right now how the water is coming up, because the water is turned off right now. But there's a big crack in this cement slab that I'm going to put the phone down on the tripod. I'm going to turn on the water again, and I'm going to show you exactly how the water is coming up through there. So let me show you that. Let's get started, and I got to start breaking up this cement, maybe tomorrow because it's already late in the afternoon today, but I'll show you everything that I have to do to get this problem fixed. So in case you ever have a plumbing leak, a plumbing slab leak or something like that, you can figure out how to take care of this yourself. So let's get started. I think it's kind of obvious that I have a little bit of a leak going on under there. And I had the water turned off for about an hour or two as I set up this whole area right here and cleaned it up and prepped it so I can start breaking it up. But you can see the water coming up through there. It was 10 times worse earlier. Some of the water has obviously percolated down through the ground, so it's not so bad right now. But if I let it go, it is a flood that takes place right here, because it was a flood. The floor was lifted up about that much from all the water pressure pushing it up. So there you go. I guess I have a slab leak. I guess I got to dig up this floor and figure out how to fix it. So there you go. Alright guys, so it's the next day and it's time to get started tearing this thing apart. So I basically got set up here. As you can see, I put tarps all around to basically try to minimize the damage that I do when I'm doing all this destruction right here. There are cabinets there that I really don't want harmed, so that's why I put up the tarps to keep down the dust and any flying debris, any chips and rocks and so forth. Because I'm breaking into the concrete right now, you never know what's going to happen. So anyway, let me give you a little bit of background as to how all this happened. I'm going to speed through this so you don't have to watch me in real time. We can go a little bit faster, but let me tell you a little bit of what happened. So basically yesterday I came down, went out to the garage, and the garage is on the other side of this wall. I'm going to put an arrow pointing to where I mean. And on the other side of this wall is the garage, and this is a shared wet wall between the garage and this inside of the house right here. So I went out to the garage and I found that it was flooded. There was water everywhere. And the first thing I thought to myself is, well, the wet wall right here where the arrow's pointing, that has some pipes going through it. Maybe one of the pipes in there burst, sprung a leak or something, and must be leaking out, and that's why the water's running all over the garage. So my first thing to do was to basically start moving all my tools and all my storage supplies and all this kind of stuff, because there's an access panel on the garage side of this wall where I can get to the plumbing more easily, but you never see it because I have a lot of stuff in front of it. So I moved all my stuff aside, got to that access panel, opened it up, and I found that yes, it was wet in there, but the pipes weren't leaking, so it wasn't coming from there. So I cleaned everything off and I tried to find where it was coming from, but still no leak inside there. So the only thing I could think of was that the water is coming from this side, the inside of the house. So again, I come inside here, I open up the cabinet, and I think, well, maybe the plumbing inside the cabinet there is leaking, because this is a wet bar, so there's a sink right there. And I think to myself, well, maybe the pipes under the sink are leaking. But again, no, the pipes were not leaking. It's not coming from the wall. But the ground was all wet and squishy, and it was hot and humid in there. So I'm almost like, oh, well, it's the worst case scenario. it's a slab leak. So it must be a pipe under the slab that's leaking. That's where all this water is coming from, because no matter how much I dried everything, the water would still keep seeping up from somewhere, and the only place left was underground. So that's when I realized, well, wait a minute, the ground's all spongy, it's all squishy here, and it's like hot, like in the tropics, like a humid place. So I said, the only thing I can do is rip up the floor, and it was already pretty loose because of all the water underneath it. So I said, all I can do is just take up the floor and figure out where the water's coming from. And that's what I did, and that's when I saw the water coming up through that crack that I showed you previously. I turned off the water, cleaned up everything, dried it all out thoroughly, turned it back on, the water came up through that crack. And that's when I realized it's the worst case scenario. I gotta start breaking up this floor because a pipe under here is what is actually leaking and causing all this problem. So that's why I started doing this. And that's why you see I have a lot of tools on hand, because you never know what project's gonna come up. And that's why this tool that I'm using right now, the Top Shack SDS hammer drill that I reviewed for you guys a couple years ago, I knew I was going to need it at some point, so that's why I got this guy and I did a review for you guys. And it's coming in very, very handy right now, because this concrete is really tough, but this guy's drilling through it just fine. And it's like 4.5 inches of concrete, so it's not easy to get to. Trust me, it took me like all day, 5 or 6 hours to break through this to the point where I could actually get down and start working properly with the hole in the pipe that I eventually discovered, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. So the more tools you have, obviously, the better it is. Alright guys, there you have it. I'm giving you a closer look. You can see exactly what we're dealing with here. And I'm covering it up with the light here, but you can still hopefully see alright. And you can see down there, that's the pipe, and I did not cause that. I went in very carefully, as you probably saw in the video, and I made sure that I stopped when I felt no resistance. So that's the hole in the pipe right there. So I got to keep expanding this hole, make it a bit bigger, and that way I can see exactly what the heck is going on and dig out this area. Hopefully that's the only hole in there, the only leak in there, but I got to be sure if I'm going through all this trouble. So let me keep on digging and see what else we can find. Anyway, but one thing to keep in mind is that basically, as I'm going through this, if you see anything that I could have been doing better, feel free to let me know. Comment down below. Your comments are always appreciated, because I'm not a plumber. I'm a DIYer. Keep that in mind. I am not an expert in this. I don't do this stuff all the time. I do this to repair things for myself, to save myself the hassle of dealing with a contractor and the hassle of paying for it. Because I don't know about anywhere else, but in my area, a job like this would have cost at least a couple $1,000, and I didn't feel like shelling out $2,000 to pay somebody else to do a job that I could do. Yes, it's a dirty job, it's a filthy job, it's tiring, it took me a long time to do it, but you know what? I'm glad that I still got the $2,000 in my pocket, and I learned something from it, and I can also help you guys learn something from it by watching my experience. So you see what I go through, and I'm going to tell you a few little tricks and tips that I learned along the way to make things easier. That way you don't make the mistakes that I did, and you can do your project a whole lot better. So let's keep on moving, and let's dig this hole up and get down to where the real problem lays. And one thing to keep in mind when looking at a job like this, one thing that my wife pointed out to me afterward, once I was doing the project and so forth and halfway through it, she pointed out that more than likely, if we had called a plumber to come and fix this slab leak, most plumbers probably would charge you a fortune just to come, dig up the floor, fix a slab leak, and then walk away. And then you'd have to get somebody else to come back in and fill in the hole, fill in the concrete, and then put down the floor on top of that. So if I didn't know how to do any of this stuff myself, I probably would have had to have 2 or 3 different people come in and do different things to finish it up. Because I don't think a plumber goes from start to finish where they actually break the floor, fix the problem, and then put back the floor and everything just the way it was. So $2,000 probably to fix the problem, and then more on top of that to put it back the way it was. That's why I generally like to do things myself, because I tackle the project from start to finish. I try to minimize the damage along the way, and I try to minimize the expenses to myself along the way. So that's one of the things, the greater control you can have over a situation by doing things for yourself, where if you hire out somebody else to do it, you give up a lot of control, and they're totally in control of the situation. They charge whatever they want, and you really have very little to say about it. Alright guys, well here we are where I got it all pretty much drilled out. I spared you having to watch me do all the drilling for all that time. I spent over 2.5 hours drilling all this out because I had to go nice and careful and slow so that I wouldn't damage the pipe as I went through the cement. So there you see, I dug it out, and you see right there, right where the two pipes cross, this whole area right here is all corroded. There's several holes, a hole there, there's a pinhole over here. All this area is seriously corroded, and there's some dents and so forth here that I am positive I did not cause. So I am thinking those were caused by rocks from when they poured the cement on top of this. Obviously, maybe there was some rocks in the sand. The sand wasn't clean enough, wasn't pure enough, because over here it's perfectly fine. There's no damage. So I am going to clean up this pipe, and basically I'm going to go back all the way back over here. It is clean and solid. There's no denting back over here. So I'm going to probably cut it over here and cut it over here somewhere, and that is where I am going to join a new piece in there and put a couple of couplers in there and so forth. And this other pipe down here, I have no idea where that pipe goes, but it is far enough underneath it that it's not an issue. They're not rubbing. That's what I thought at first when I first saw it, but you can see I can put my hand through it, so the thickness of my hand is what separates them. So I'm going to basically start cleaning this up a little bit, get ready to cut it, and I'll bring you guys back when I'm ready to do all that. Alright guys, here's another shot of the area that is all messed up. I decided to clean it up a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better what is going on there. And there you can see the carnage of what I'm working with. The carnage of what the water did. There's a hole right there, a hole right there, and a hole right there. 3 holes drilled by the water and the corroding of this pipe. So basically I have to cut this whole area out, and you can see exactly all the damage that was done there and everything I've had to deal with. So there you go. Then I'm going to come back and start cleaning this up, and I'll bring you back when I'm ready. Alright guys, and there you see the conclusion of what I was doing. I didn't show basically soldering all this stuff together because it was kind of crazy. The flame kept going out on me because I was pointing the can going downwards and it didn't like it. So that was problematic trying to do all this stuff and shoot at the same time. But there is the final result. I had a heck of a time basically getting this pipe bent to that shape right there. It was, I used type L and it's not soft and it's very difficult to bend it. I kinked and ruined one piece, so I had to use a second piece. And there you go. Basically cut it over there, and joined it together. Not easy to do, but I got it done. I spent all day doing this. Now I'm ready to take a shower and basically clean up tomorrow because it's late in the day today. I'm not going to do that. So let me see. I may come back and explain more. I may not. I don't know, but I still have a lot of cleanup to do. As you can see, I still have this big old opening right here in the middle of my bar, and it's quite a mess that I have to clean up. So we'll go from here and see what I come up with next. Alright guys, so it's been a few days. In case you couldn't tell at the end of the previous segment, I was exhausted at the end of that. That was a very long day, very tiring. A lot of things went crazy and went sideways, and it was just plain nuts. So by the end of the day, I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was eat, take a shower, and get some rest. So that's why I ended that part and I moved on. So it's a few days later, I decided to leave the hole open to make sure that there was no complications with the pipe, that it didn't break or start leaking on me, and also to let it ventilate and get some of the moisture out of there that leaked into the ground. And trust me, it's been rather damp and so forth there for quite a while, so I let it ventilate. So it's about a week later now, and what I'm doing is I let the sand dry out outdoors in the sun, and now I'm putting the sand back in. I'm going to fill it in with the sand and let that settle down for a while. I'm putting it in gently because I don't want to disturb the pipe or any of that. So I got to fill it in below and around it all and fill it on top of it and so forth. And then later I'll come back and we'll do the concrete. Alright, and there you can see the finished sand where I filled it all in with the sand, let it dry for a few days, and then now we're going to continue. And when I tore into this hole and I broke everything apart, I had ripped through some rebar that was holding all the cement together. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill some holes into the existing slab. And since I don't have any rebar to use here to tie it all together, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert some long screws into the existing slab. That way, when I pour the concrete into this, it'll tie it all in together. So the screws that I'm going to put into it right now will take the place of the rebar because I don't want to have a situation where where this part right here may either settle or raise up and separate itself from the existing slab. So I'm going to tie it all in together, and then I'm going to pour the cement in on top of that. And also another thing that this had when I ripped through it all that I didn't show you previously is that there was a moisture barrier there to keep moisture from coming up from the ground into the slab and into the house. So since I don't have any moisture barrier material and I wasn't going to buy it for this little tiny piece of slab here that I'm replacing, what I'm doing is I'm using a garbage bag and a big garbage bag, like a 50 or 60 gallon garbage bag, and I'm folding it over 3 or 4 or 5 times and putting it in there. That's the entire garbage bag folded over onto itself, and that should make a very thick barrier, probably thicker than what was already there. So that'll keep any moisture down in the ground and stop it from coming up into the slab, up into the house. So I'm trying to replace everything that was there with my own way of doing it and just making everything work appropriately. So that's what's going on here, and then we're going to move into pouring the cement in just a moment. All right, so here we are at the point where I'm finally filling up the hole again with some more fresh cement. So this has been basically a couple of weeks now that all this has been going on, because I allowed time for the pipe to settle, the sand to settle, everything to dry, let everything air out a bit. So basically here I'm finally closing it up and putting in the cement slab. So you see the screws around the edges that are acting as rebar, and you see the plastic at the bottom to act as a moisture barrier. So now I'm putting in the fresh cement, and one of the things also that I put into the mix is something you can buy at any home center. You can buy a bottle, it's a liquid, and you add it into the mix, and it basically makes the cement more sticky, so it'll bond better to any cement around it. So that's already in the mix. You can't see it, but you just pour that in there as you're mixing up the cement and getting it ready to pour. So that's in there, and that should hopefully give me a better bond and prevent any separation down the road. Now, one little mistake that I made, since I was in a hurry, I'm always in a hurry, one thing that I forgot to do is, what I should have done and what I recommend you do is take a spray bottle and moisten the edges of the old slab of cement, so that way it doesn't suck out the moisture of the fresh new cement that you're pouring in. That's one thing that can happen, is cement is kind of like a sponge, so it'll suck up any moisture in the fresh new cement that you're pouring in. So that's the one thing I should have done. I don't think it makes that big a difference because this area is too small. I mean, you're only talking about maybe 2 feet in length by 6-7 inches in width, so it's not a huge area, but it's always a good idea to do that. But what I did to compensate for that was, after I finished all this, and I didn't film this part, but after I finished all this throughout the day, as the cement was drying up, I just went back and I sprayed it with a water bottle, and I just kept it moist throughout the day. That way, as any moisture was being sucked out by the old cement, I just kept adding more into it, and that way it allowed it to dry or cure in a bit more stable way, instead of just being shocked and being drained of any existing moisture. So that took care of that, and hopefully everything's fine, and we'll keep going from here. Alright, so here we are. I let the cement dry for about a week, and the white stuff that you see there is basically, I took some stucco patch and I just went around the edges and I made sure that it was all nice and smooth, that I sanded all this smooth, because I didn't want any imperfections between the two parts of the cement, the two different parts of the slab, to telegraph up through the floor. And what we're going to do now is I'm cleaning up so I can put down the floor, and we continue on from this. We're a few weeks into it. Every time I do something, I allow like a few days, a week, something like that, for everything to settle, to dry, etc., so we can get this thing looking as good as possible. So what we're doing now is I have marked out the sections of the different parts of the floor that I'm going to put down. I was able to save all the different parts of the floor, and I kept them all this time, and what I'm going to do now is basically put it all back. Since I did this carefully from the beginning, and I took enough time to try to save as much material as possible, I'm going to put back the floor the way it was. And that's something that you probably wouldn't get if you were to pay a plumber to do this for you. So first I'm going to put down the old 1960s brown linoleum, which we're not going to see, but that has to go down to be able to create a base, and I'm putting down the glue for that right now. And then after that one is all set and done, then we'll come back and put the finished floor on top of that one. So we're getting closer to the home stretch. So let's see how this turns out. Let's keep on going. And basically the way this works right here is I bought this adhesive to hold it all down, and what you do is you spray out the adhesive first, and you allow it to dry and get tacky, tacky, and then you put the flooring on top of that. And this linoleum flooring is very tough, very difficult to work with. So what I'm going to have to do is, once I start sticking it down, since it got a little bit weird and wonky because I had to rip it up and then the water pressure kind of stretched it and messed it up a little bit, I'm going to have to use the heat gun to basically soften it up and get it to lay down properly, nice and flat, so I don't have any bubbles or anything anywhere, because any mistakes you make on the bottom floor will telegraph up to the upper floor. So that's why everything I've been doing is trying to make everything as smooth as possible, because I don't want any imperfections to show through the finished floor later on. So let's keep on going. Alright, so here we are looking at the linoleum all put down. All three pieces of the linoleum, I was able to stretch it out and make them work, and I put them down. I used the heat gun, I heated them up, I made them relax, and I made them stick down nice and flat and even to the floor, so there's no imperfections. Unfortunately, the lines at the corners didn't line up perfectly. They got a little bit messed up, so I had to do a little bit of trimming. There was some voids in between the different pieces, but all I did was I went through and I used some filler material. I filled it in so it's all nice and flat, so when you stand on top of it, when you run your hand across it, you don't feel any difference between the linoleum and the patches that I put in between them. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting down the adhesive, I'm going to let this get tacky, and then I'm going to put the finished floor on top of this. So we're at the final stretch. We're putting down the finished floor. We should be done really soon. So let's see how that goes. Alright guys, here we are at the end of the project. You've seen it all from start to finish. Now I'm putting down the finishing touches, putting down the last tiles necessary to wrap this up and put it back the way it was before the calamity struck. So let's see how this all finishes up. I'm going to bring you back for a finishing shot once all the tiles are put down and wrapped up. So let's come back in just a moment and see how this all ends. Alright guys, there you have it. Operation Slab Leak has been completed. As you see, I put all the tiles back, all the corners, everything has been put back exactly the way it was before I started all the demolition. I know I didn't show you the way it looked, but this is the way it looked. As you see, there's the old floor right there, and basically it continues onto there into this bar. There's two rooms, as I mentioned previously, one over there, one over here. They all have the same flooring. But I was able to salvage and reuse the existing tiles, so everything is back the way it was when I started doing all this to repair the problem. So there you have it. I hope it looks good to you guys. I think it turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with what I got done. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye for now.